welcome back to Whack Nation. Today we're at Race Division and we're installing one of the most controversial performance parts, a cold air intake system. That's the unboxing done. So what do we have here? This is the carbon fiber intake system from Eventuri for the FK8. Being a carbon fiber system, we've obviously got some really nice carbon fiber parts, which I'll get some close-ups for you. We've got this really nice molded silicon tube, and we've got the Eventuri cone style filter, and this particular part here, known as the MAF tube, which in this case is the version 2. Now, why are intakes in general, even this intake, so controversial of a performance part? It's not because we go to Super Cheap Auto and put a $20 pod filter on and claim huge gains. It's because the manufacturers, Eventuri in this case, claim 14 to 20 horsepower and 22 to 29 foot-pounds of torque without a tune. Without a tune. Now, whether this is true or not, how does Eventuri plan on delivering this? Well, the first is what they call a Venturi stack, which is this part here. We have a very large inlet here and a very small outlet here, but the amount of air going through each is the same, which means that as it goes from big to small, that airspeed actually increases, and what they call air velocity also increases. So whilst it's not induction like a turbo, it is still increasing the amount of air and the speed that is going through that pipe. The second, and the one that I think will make the most difference, is this piece here, which is actually a second inlet for the airbox. Now the FK8 has a single inlet that's just above the front bumper that is 35 centimeters squared. So roughly, I don't know, about that big. Now it doesn't matter how free-flowing your intake is, if the air through that hole is consumed, you're not going to make any more power. So adding a second inlet is actually a very, very good idea. Now, there is a second part to this. I've got it over here with this, which is this box here, which we haven't opened yet. And this is Eventuri's turbo inlet tube. Now, we're going to do a separate video on that because we want to test these parts one at a time, as you guys know. But they also claim some gains with this as well. So I'm curious to see how each of these do individually and together. So, over to Leon and the boys here at Race Division, let's get this installed. Alright, thanks Leon and his team here at Race Division. It definitely sounds a lot better, that's for sure. However, we're going to take it to Tunehouse now and see if it actually makes more power. We're back at Tunehouse. I brought my Civic down. I've been driving with the intake for about a week now. What I've noticed is the mid-range is definitely a lot freer. However, I'm getting a little bit stumbling down low, so I wonder if the air-fuel ratio has been thrown off a little bit. Now the manufacturer, again, claims 14 to 20 horsepower and 22 to 29 foot-pounds of torque. So let's get it in there and see what it actually makes. Alright guys, results time. So the stock Civic made about 200 kilowatts and 355 newton meters. The Eventuri Intake, well, it only made 193 kilowatts and only 343 newton meters. Whilst these are the peak losses, the car actually lost power across the entire rev range. So much for it feeling a lot freer. So the mid-range is definitely a lot freer. Sorry, Eventuri, but your performance claims in this perfectly controlled environment cannot be confirmed. Alright, so the part we're going to install today is the Eventuri turbo inlet tube. Now I've unboxed it quickly just to make sure it wasn't broken before I got to Tunehouse today, but I'll show you what's inside the box anyway. Firstly, the silicon joiner. The inlet and outlet have been made bigger on both sides to accommodate for the new tube, which is good. Actually gets rid of a bottleneck as well. And obviously the part that we want to see is the actual tube itself. So the entire construction is carbon fiber with some thermal management underneath here where it will come into almost contact with the turbo. We can see we've got a very, very big inlet here, obviously getting a little bit smaller to where it joins into the turbo. So I'm really keen to see how this will do once it's in the car. Alright, here is the dyno results for the day. As we went through earlier in the video, the stock car made about 200 kilowatts and 355 newton meters. And then when I added the Eventuri Intake by itself, we ended up losing power and torque across the rev range. However, when I added the turbo inlet tube, we actually picked up some power. Now remember, these results are without a tune. So to pick up 8 kilowatts over the factory intake system, and 14 or so kilowatts over the Eventuri system by itself, that's actually really remarkable. Looking at the torque figure, you'll notice we've lost almost a single newton meter of torque. As you may know, lots of cars actually restrict the amount of torque being sent to the wheels through their tune. I wouldn't be surprised if the Civic Type R in this case is also doing that. With that limitation removed, I would probably hazard a guess that this intake and turbo tube combo would actually pick up some torque as well.